All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to our Digital Services Forum biweekly call. Today we're going to focus on value stream management. It's one of the things that people were asking for in the chat over the last few months. So we have a guest in here today to help us walk through some of that. Before we get started, I want to go through and just remind everybody of what the Digital Services Forum is, and then the resources out there for you to use in order to exploit some of the sharing that we do here. On the bottom, there's a URL, and I'll paste that URL as soon as we get done and everybody's in. I'll paste that URL inside of the chat just so everybody has it. But that URL will bring you into that little about screen in our community. And that about screen will let you link up to the Zoom sessions. So if you have somebody that's interested that hasn't been there before, that's a good link to give them because they can get to the Zoom meetings here and register for whatever ones they want to. They can also go to the homepage, which lets them see all the prior presentations, along with any material that our presenters shared. There's the YouTube playlist, and then there's also a link to a shared instance. And that shared instance is kind of in between states right now. I killed the old one, but it's still there. So a lot of people are still accessing the old instance. So I'll put it on the community. I'm going to put a link to the new instance up there. And anybody who had passwords on the old instances, they'll work on the new instance. So we're moving it over to try to get a little bit better performance than we had before. Okay, and a lot of the shared work that we have is on that instance. So that's why we use it, is so we can demo off that. So this way, if people are doing demos, they want to do a little configuration, they can do it on there. So this way they don't have to send update sets to everybody. And that's all the stuff we're using right now, is those four main areas is where we share what we present here. Our vision is really to help everybody think about their digital transformation. So a lot of what we talk about on the platform with ServiceNow is how do you configure the service parts of ServiceNow, the service delivery. So we're not talking a lot about ITOM, we're not talking a lot about SPM, like all those demos that you usually see. We're talking about the core part of the platform of service delivery. And that's really what we focus on here that's different from other meetings. Our mission is to let our members drive their own digital transformations by bringing this knowledge back to their organizations. And then we share as much as possible. So if people got stuck on things that they can share and it's in an update set, or it's a presentation used for internal communications, a white paper, we share as much as possible to help get you there quicker. And when we host it, it's the whole EA team, and I'm part of the enterprise architecture team. And the whole EA team is the team that brings content forward and shares it. So we try to split it up so it's part ServiceNow and it's part the customer. We try to get that as much as possible. Today's could be more ServiceNow, but sometimes it goes that way. And our main ways of delivering this information back to you is in the 2-hour meetings, right? The 2-hour meetings we have. Sometimes we've done knowledge presentations where we've had panels together before. And we've even done like half-day workshops where we went in and built some CSDM models together in teams. But our primary way is this two-week meeting is the one that we like to keep consistent. All right, now today's content, I just want to set the content up a little bit. I always show, whenever I do my CSDM workshops, and a lot of you have been in those, whenever we do the workshops, we always start with a slide like this, because we talk about the most important part on this model or all the people around the outside. You're trying to unify a group of people, and how we do that in the boxes, right? That comes later, but a lot of people forget to look at these. So these people coming together are going to have different things that they need, and they're going to have different people that are stakeholders of the information that they present. So we have to really be cognizant of that as we're looking at this. And a few weeks ago, we took a look at the tool chain, right? If you look at the whole tool chain as you build these services, it gets really complex because there's a lot of things and a lot of people use a lot of different tools. So the tool chain is this one here. And this is just one example. I really like this screen because it has so many of them on there. And it really puts the problem in your face, right? There's all these tools. We have to figure out which ones we use to show which people. And this is your task, and it's really difficult. What we're going to talk about in the next few weeks is we're going to focus on this section here, the enterprise architecture section. And one thing we're going on today is the value streams, but also a lot of people asked about business capabilities. And so all these different tools along the way, we're still supporting the delivery of that digital service or the digital product or the application, depending on which organization you're in. We're still supporting that delivery, but it's, like I said, from all these different perspectives, and then all these different people that are bringing those perspectives. Okay, so today we're going to try it. We've been poking around this tool chain the whole time, and today we have a guest with us, Ian. He's from an architecture team, but in a different country. I'll let him introduce himself. But I'm going to hand it over to Ian, and he's going to take us over. He's going to take us through a lot of the work that they're doing on digital product value streams, and then what that means for the platform. So Ian, I don't want to steal any more of your thunder. I'll hand it over to you and let you take share. And any questions along the way, it's the usual, just put them in the chat, and we'll try to stop Ian where we can and bring those questions in.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Let me start by sharing my screen.
Sounds good.
And I'll switch this here. So thank you everyone for joining. As you previously heard, my name is Ian, but before I start, let's get the formalities out of the way. Safe harbor statement, you've probably seen this a few times. For those who might not have seen this, it basically says do not make any buying decisions based on future statements, meaning anything that's in the roadmap is not usually guaranteed to go to production, but everything that is in production or available today on our platform, that's obviously available to you. So as I said before, my name is Ian. I work in the enterprise architecture team in EMEA. So basically what I would call a branch of John and his team, focusing on accounts in EMEA that are headquartered in EMEA. But that also means in many cases when I get involved that these organizations are very multinational. So yeah, it's very common for us to also work with colleagues in the US, in Asia, yeah, as global as you would expect. My background is in technology operations. Specifically speaking, I was a platform owner and a customer before I joined ServiceNow. Besides that, I also did security operations. I did identity and access management, HR. You see the list on the screen. If it's okay with everyone, I'll switch off my camera and bring it back later. So let me quickly figure that out quickly. Okay, it's not working, but okay, I guess we'll just keep it. Oh, here we go. Okay. Okay, so with that being said, before I also start, I want to acknowledge the rest of the team. This is not a topic that I'm working on my own. There is a huge team behind me, very skilled, coaching, bouncing off ideas, each with their own speciality, or let's say their own experience. So behind everything I talk about is actually a team of people bringing this up and really trying to create thought leadership, trying to help our customers think about these topics much more effectively and much more from an end-to-end perspective. Moving on, this is the agenda we have today. So I'll start with what a value stream is, perhaps very trivial for most of you. What is a digital product value stream according to how we see it and how we are approaching the topic? Why is it important? The challenges faced, and yeah, where do you start on ServiceNow? Our goals, and then where do you start on ServiceNow? So what does value stream management, digital product value stream management mean on ServiceNow if you decide to start tomorrow? As John mentioned previously, if you have any questions, please do feel free to write them in the chat. I will try and make this as interactive as possible. This session is for you, as John said in the beginning, so I'll do my best to cater to any let's say, diversions or side topics you might want to have in regards to value stream management. So yeah, I mean, let's start with the trivial. What is value stream management? I pasted the Wikipedia definition on the screen. I should have asked before, does everyone see my screen? I've been in a situation where...
Yes, yeah, we definitely.
Okay. I should have asked that right in the beginning. Apologies on my side. So yeah, we have Wikipedia's definition on the screen, but I actually prefer this definition here. And it simply says, if you have a product for a customer, there is probably a value stream, or most probably a value stream behind that. The challenge lies in seeing it. This comes from a book. I haven't read it myself, but I learned this from one of my colleagues, learning to see value stream mapping to create value and eliminate muda. So that's where we're starting from, right? We're starting from the customer. We're starting from how the customer interprets the value they get from your organization and everything behind that that is required to offer that value. And I think it goes without saying that, yes, it can be very complicated. And we will be looking at that today as we go through this presentation. So going deeper into this, what is a value stream? I thought let's start with ServiceNow's let's say approach, or let's say view on this. And I think this is a good slide I can use to explain that. At the bottom, you see the first layer, and as we go higher, I will try and explain what it means to us. So what does it mean from a customer perspective to increase your maturity in regards to value stream management? What would you need to add, or how would you need to approach these topics as you let's say try and solve them within your organizations? The lowest one is the one you probably see the most, or let's say the one that is most common, where it's very developer centric. It's about planning, it's about building. Obviously, in this case, this time to value is also very important. But it's these in this type of on this layer of maturity, what we usually see is organizations that are very developer centric, right? And that might work. For example, if you're in a startup, really, I mean, you're starting from afresh, you have to do things quick, you don't have the luxury of setting everything up completely. This is absolutely valid. But what we usually see is with time, there is usually a need to increase the maturity. And I'll explain as we go through what the motivation is. In the beginning, as I mentioned, it's all about efficiency and productivity, right? And it's about getting things done as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. But then as maturity increases, and in this case, on the second level, you see it's also about operational metrics and trying to quantify the operational side of things. Now, some start on level 2, some might be stuck on level 1. Again, it's all about your organization's ambition and what you want to achieve, or let's say how closely you want to work with the business to support them on their business needs. Now, operational VSM, in other words, I sometimes describe it as DevOps. As you probably already know it, but then it doesn't stop there. What we usually see with our customers is there might be an expansion of priorities. So for example, servicing is one of those topics that obviously shouldn't be handled on an island within the organization. It should be a team collaboration with everyone else providing the technology. So with many of our customers, we see a need to make sure that whatever the DevOps side of things is doing is aligned with the servicing side, or let's say vice versa, servicing is aligned with the DevOps side of things, to make sure that whatever the developers are pushing over the fence towards production is serviced in a manner that complies with the value of the organization. So servicing is still very important. On the other hand, or let's say on the left side, we also have prioritization. That becomes obviously a bigger topic, or let's say is a big topic with bigger organizations, making sure that priorities are funded to completion becomes extremely critical. But actually, before I spend too much time here, I want to move on to the fourth level, which I think is where things get very interesting. And for us, the fourth level is how we see the feedback loop, from ideation to servicing and the outcome, and connecting everything back to ideation to make sure that all activities are oriented on data or facts and not just intuition, right? But as we go along, I'll talk more about that. But I just thought for 1 second, I would give you a bit of our perspective of how we look at digital product value stream management and how we, let's say, the challenges we see in the market as we try and help our customers. So, I mean, why? Why even? I mean, most of you have gone through multiple phases, whether it was ITIL, whether it was this or that. There's always something out. But why now digital product value stream management? Well, first of all, value stream management has been around for a long, long time. It might not have been that known across all industries. My understanding is it's very, very well known in the manufacturing industries, but it's not something new. And it's simply, in my opinion, one way one way of trying to align with the business and trying to work better as teams within the organization. And what you're seeing in front of you is a reason why we believe digital product value stream management is becoming so important. So what you're seeing at the moment on the screen is, let's say, the traditional perspective of how organizations have approached these topics. But then as they become more, well, I hate to use this word, agile, or as they become more business oriented, or as they adapt to the macroeconomic conditions, it's important that the whole business and IT evolves. And what we're seeing is what you're seeing on the right on the screen, where teams are becoming more important, making them more autonomous, trying to give them more decision power in whatever they do. In terms of, let's say, plans, right? We know that as things become more volatile within the markets, it's very important to approach many of these topics in an iterative manner, and not just a yearly planning that perhaps within a month already becomes unsuitable, or even in terms of risk, right? Measuring risk and making sure risk is part of each topic as the business goes through it, and as you develop your technology towards the target maturity, is also becoming something that's very important. Now, at the bottom, there's a sentence that I personally really, really like. Some of you might have already heard about it. It's from Steve Jobs. And he talks about starting with the customer, in this case, the customer experience, and then working your way back towards the technology. And I think that's actually a good approach if you're looking at value stream management, right? Where is the value for the customer? And in this case, a customer is not just an external regular customer. Obviously, a customer could also be an internal customer if you're offering internal HR, internal services, whatever it might be, HR, IT, security. But on the other hand, the context of how those services are used towards that external customer is very important, and making sure that you're maximizing your contribution to the business is part of this topic. Now, it's not only about people and culture. It's also about technology and process. And in this case, we're also seeing a transition, or let's say a change in culture, in making sure that those traditional aspects, like e.g., when you build something, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Going with that MVP culture or mentality and then reiterating to improve it in future releases is, for one example, of how we're seeing these things change. And other things like, I already spoke about agile before, I already spoke about customer value, but it's all, to me, all of this is about doing more with less, faster, right? That's the simplest way I can explain it. The business is expecting technology departments to understand how they think better than ever. And it's important in this particular context to make sure that the line between business and technology is minimized and that the business impact is maximized as much as possible. So moving on, what are the challenges we see, right? And I took one example out of the State of Value Stream Management report. This is usually provided by the VSM consortium. You should absolutely check it out. The link is at the bottom. And I took this one let's say, overview to show you what the feedback is from the market, right? This was done in a survey where members of the Value Stream Consortium gave their feedback. And two things I want to pull up in this particular case is, number one, the no resources for this. So basically, this is feedback where representatives of organizations explained why they have difficulty adopting value stream management, and having insufficient resources seems to be one of the topics that comes up. And as you can see in this case, resources equals skills, budget, and time. On the other hand, we have the 17.8 answer, which was we have many other active change programs. So, I mean, I won't go through all of them, but I think when I look at this, it, at least for me, translates a bit into what I see in the field when I'm trying to work with customers and supporting them throughout these topics. How I would have described it is silos, right? And it's not the only thing, but it's one of those things where I think in many occasions, especially in situations where there's a lot of pressure from the business. People are working on multiple topics at the same time. I often see situations where, it's distracting, right? And it's sort of a topic where, like, I have 20 things on my table. What do I focus on? And now comes VSM, and so it's one of those things where I feel leadership needs to prioritize, right? And more importantly, leadership needs to make sure that, culturally speaking, the existing silos can be broken up. What we see is usually when we get involved, many of these departments are very used to the ways they work. And in some cases, there might be some hesitance to open up and to really show and connect what they do to the rest of the organization. So you're seeing multiple reasons here, but I'm mentioning this specific silo challenge because this is one of the ones I see the most when I'm working in the field. I'll pause for a second because I can't tell if we have questions or not. Let me see.
I think we're good. There was just so far just a comment. So.
Okay, so moving on. Why are we? What's our goal, right? Why are we doing this? It starts with helping our customers in multiple ways. The first one is driving business value streams while helping the business focus on outcomes and reducing costs. So this is more of an alignment perspective and making sure that these topics receive the importance they deserve from your C-level. So we're trying to explain or show how important and how impactful this topic can be if done right. And connecting all these topics together, in this case, can also increase transparency, which is usually in the interest of the business. The other part is obviously what I mentioned at the beginning, maturing towards maturing within the maturity models we spoke about before. Again, if the goal is not necessarily to approach those topics end to end, then that's fine. It's not, we don't do this just for the sake of doing it. There has to be a desire at the end of the day to have that transparency and to really try and find those bottlenecks within the organization that are causing perhaps some challenges behind those value streams. The other part is about being specific to the different personas. If some of you have seen the blueprint, you will see that it has quite a number of personas on it. This is, again, to reiterate that the different personas have different ways of working, and that is absolutely fine. ServiceNow does not aim to change the way people work. It's about improving the way they work without necessarily, reinventing what they do. And so the experiences they get through the system, whether it's working through ServiceNow or working in the tool of choice while consuming data from ServiceNow, is very important. And last but not least, really enabling teams to still work in those tools of choice, or let's say tools of preference, but not compromising on that end-to-end approach when it comes to having visibility into what's going on and how technology, people, process is supporting the business value towards the customers. So I would say these are the four main goals we have. I'll quickly jump to this one here, and this is what it's all about. Now, today we haven't planned to go through the whole blueprint in detail. This is something we'll probably do in a separate session. But if some of you have been wondering, okay, so what's this about? What's this value stream management about? This is a topic that we've been working on for a while. And in the last few weeks, we released a blueprint. This is a summarized version of that blueprint. And I will provide a link for those who are interested in accessing the actual blueprint. But this, on a high level, quickly shows the topics we're looking at the moment in the context of digital product value stream management. Now, every color you see here, is potentially someone's career, right? And it might have been that they've spent quite a number of years working on these topics. And this is the whole art of this topic. How do you bring all these various topics together, plus all the various integrations that are usually required to make sure that these processes work as they should? And this starts on the left from ideation, as we were talking about before, all the way to the business value on the right. Now, as I said at the beginning, we won't have time to go through each box, so to say, to explain what we do and how the value transforms as it goes through the value stream. But if this is something that might interest you, then it's definitely something we can look at for the future. I'll pause for a second. Any questions? I see something in the chat.
There's one from Don in there. Can I understand that the control for VSM and IT for IT is questions plus data by role as the control for ITIL SS? Don, why don't you come off and ask that, reading it?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Sure. The idea is that with ITIL, the idea is that service strategy is answered with continuous improvement with data with context. So I'll have my business requirements and service strategy. I get the results later on where there's, and I compare that to my requirements to say, job well done. This stuff that's included in the Oreo cookie was correct. And what you're suggesting is with the value stream or IT for IT story, that you'll provide questions by role, which will have answers to it in the light of the VSM interface or tool. Is that what I'm seeing or hearing?
So I think I understood you, but if I don't, just correct me afterwards. Yes and no. There is a perspective where I see two perspectives in your question. There is the perspective of the roles within the value stream that are actively responsible in many cases and really core to that value stream. And in that context, I think you'd be right, because in many cases, they do have those, let's say, continuous iterations. As you mentioned, the example is, did we actually produce what we said we will or what we wanted to do? So there is that perspective, but then there is also the supporting perspective where you might have security being a supporting role within that particular value stream. But
that's it.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you're nailing it. The idea is that in the same way that you can use value stream management to say, this is what I expect my story to give, and this is the explanation, the control is the proof that you actually got what you envision with the value stream.
Absolutely. And this is what, for me, what I meant with in the beginning, I talked about, using data to validate intuition. I briefly showed, I didn't really talk about it. I just showed it. I think that is very tightly tied to what you're just saying. In many cases, when you have that beginning process where you're making assumptions, we believe if we do A, B, C, D, this will be the result, right? Once it gets out there to the customer and the value can start to be consumed. But as we all know, in many cases, those assumptions could be wrong. And you might have actually even delivered what you actually planned. So if there was a checkbox somewhere, yes, you did, but the value wasn't interpreted as you expected. So that's basically what I was trying to say at the end of the day. Yes, there's that aspect of we need to ship something, and so we're aiming for this release to do that. But there's also the aspect of, did it actually achieve what it was supposed to do? Did we see our NPS go up? Do we see whatever, I don't know, for example, registrations happening faster or not falling off, for example? So I don't know if I'm complimenting what you said, but
you're nailing it. That's great. That's the story we want to hear. The idea is that value stream management provides an opportunity for the business to quickly see that not only this is the value that we're aspiring to, but this is the control. This data and context is the answer to my business questions. So that's it. Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you, Don. Any other questions? Okay, so I'll just move on. I've lost track of time, so let me quickly look at my watch. Okay, so what happens then? I mean, let me quickly go back and then I'll move on forward. So so if we look at this in a ServiceNow context, first of all, one thing I want to mention is in many cases when I get involved, it might not necessarily be the case that the customer wants to exchange everything they have. In fact, that almost never happens. In many cases, when we get involved, and as you're looking at the screen, you see that there are different tools beneath. And in many cases, they might be very, very happy with a set of tools in a certain area and maybe less with other tools in another area. But I think it's important to mention that for us, it's not just about, let's say, making sure that the value stream works on ServiceNow, but it's also about the integrations with those tools to make sure that if there's data from the value stream that we need to push back to some of those tools because perhaps they fulfill a certain objective within their space, within the domain, that is also covered. So this is not just about pulling data from those tools and, we do everything in ServiceNow and that's it. where ServiceNow, it works in such a way that if there is a reason to push that data back and orchestrate that tool in a specific context, then that is already implied with this particular overview. Now, moving on, once you bring all these topics together, right? And this is where this slide comes in. I mentioned at the beginning, it's about visibility. It's about understanding, where the bottlenecks within my value stream. How am I contributing value to the business? What is the business expecting of me? And what are the, let's say, constraints that I might have, be it cost, be it time, be it whatever it is. So at the end of the day, as we were talking about the roles, once we pull in that those different pieces of data into that context of a product, and in this case, because I know I'm speaking to people who know CSDM very well, in this case, product, at least for me, would holistically mean a service, and on the planning side, it could be a business application, people, whatever is taken, whatever components are required to manage or maintain that service. So holistically, from ideation all the way to the service side of things. And in this case, for a digital product owner, it's extremely important to not just see what their various teams are working on in the context of that product, but also how that product is performing on the operations side. So having that end-to-end view in one, let's say, well, it's actually three screens. I'm talking about digital digital portfolio management is very useful, and it brings in context from different, let's say, sources. So I'll give you an example. If you are doing value stream management, and perhaps you might only be focusing on security operations, right? In the context of what I'm saying, you would expect to see, for example, security incidents, you would expect to see vulnerabilities, or whatever else is covered by your security organization. On the other hand, if you add a risk perspective to that security operations data, now we're able to quantify what those vulnerabilities and incidents mean to the business. What are these incidents jeopardizing on the business side in terms of the service provided and whatever is being attacked? Or if it's in terms of vulnerabilities, what inherent risk is included within that service, and what needs to be done to minimize that risk to an acceptable level? So it goes back to what I was saying before. If looking at this data in the context of one department is good, but looking at it in the context of multiple departments can exponentially increase the value of the data and really support the decision makers to make sure that whatever they do is aligned to what the business wants, and is really in, well, not just what the business wants, but also is done in a timely manner as the business expects. Now, I also wanted to touch, this is just an extract of integrations we have. Obviously, there's many more, and some of you might have heard that we introduced RPA functionality, which obviously gives us even more possibilities in terms of integration. I don't really want to focus on that too much today. What I do want to focus on is, one second, let me quickly activate this screen. What I actually do want to focus on, as this is the Digital Services Forum, is the CSDM perspective, right? And for me, this is potentially one of the most critical parts of value stream mapping and looking at topics in a value stream context. Now, again, I think I don't have to preach to the choir. I'm sure you all understand what the potential of CSDM is, but I quickly want to talk about it in the context of VSM to reiterate how important this usually is when we work with our customers. So what I'm showing in front of you, maybe you've seen it before. This is my interpretation of CSDM, right? And John spoke about this briefly before he handed off to me in the beginning. CSDM is about helping teams, processes, data work better together, right? I usually call it the United Nations of data. And the reason why I call it that is similar to the real United Nations. You have different countries, right, coming together to trying to achieve something higher than their own department, right? Something more impactful than what their department can do alone. This is the way I see CSDM in a similar manner. you have all these disciplines from enterprise architecture to DevOps all the way to IT governance. Each discipline is valid on its own, but bringing them together and bringing the data together in the context of a service product, however you're looking at it, is what makes it extremely powerful. And this is this applies just the same for value stream management. And moving on, I'll skip this. I want to go to this. So when we work with our customers, this is one way I can visualize how I approach the topic. If you look at the bottom, we have the data backbone with CSDM. This is what I just mentioned in terms of how do things fit together? How does data translate from technology CIs to business services, technical services, and even at some point in terms of planning business capabilities. On the other hand, there are these supporting processes we also talked about just a few minutes ago, plus the value stream that basically sticks these processes together to create visibility behind that value. Now, this is where our products come in. And obviously, in this case, there can be situations where the customer has a different tool and is happy with that tool. That is part of the conversations we have. How do we make use of existing investments? How do we maximize existing investments, but making sure that we can help the customer create the value stream on ServiceNow and join all these topics that go across the organization. On the right, you also see the different cloud providers that we support, some a bit better than others, but we have basic support for I believe all 6 that you see on the right. And what I wanted to mention here, and you've probably heard this from a CSDM perspective, is think big, start small, right? And what I mean with that is, yes, you might be looking at the whole value stream and how everything fits together from beginning to value. But on the other hand, you do not have to boil the ocean. You can select, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 critical business products or services and start there, right? Visibility usually in this context, even in the beginning, even when you haven't necessarily established full transparency on how that value stream works, in my experience, the value, or let's say the improvements, start propping up very quickly, even if you're not done. So it's not about necessarily doing it perfect. It's about starting and building that culture to be able to work more efficiently and more collaboratively with other teams. And when I say that, I mean that from a process perspective and from a data perspective in the CSDM context. I'll take a pause. Any questions so far? Okay, so to finish off, because as I said before, we weren't planning to go into the details of VSM in this specific session. What I do want to share with you towards the end is this overview. So this is the blueprint I was talking about before. We will provide the presentation to you. So if you cannot scan the QR code right now, don't worry about it. You'll have access to this document. There is a blueprint you can download for free. It's in PDF form. It basically it shows how ServiceNow products fit together in a VSM context. That is what you're seeing at the bottom with the different colors. These solutions are obviously modular. So if you work with ServiceNow, you probably already know that. But on the other hand, on top, we also have the CSDM perspective, which is represented by the 2 layers you see at the top and the different stages that data, or let's say the life cycle of the product goes through towards value. So I highly recommend you check it out if you haven't already seen it. And obviously, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask. On the left, we published a blog article that is, let's say, accompanying the blueprint. So you might find some useful information there too. Please do check that out also. And yeah, I mean, John, for now, I'm looking at the time and I'm wondering probably it's probably a good time to take a break and do a Q&A, or what do you think?
Sounds good.
Yeah. So questions.
When you look at the value stream itself, is there a value stream owner and then there's individual owners underneath the value stream? Is that how you see it usually? Is there ownership at the value stream level, or is there ownership at the individual process level and it's more of a group effort?
So I'll speak out of my own experience. So it's definitely not, let's say, representative of the globe or let's say companies around the world. But in my experience, the value stream owners are usually at the top, meaning they have an umbrella function looking at their value stream being served by different teams. So the ownership, in my experience, from what I've seen, is usually from the product owner perspective. But then there is a certain type of ownership from the bottom, but it's slightly different. And what I mean with that is, yes, you might have digital product owners owning the value stream, but you might still have a head of portfolio management or a head of cloud excellence, for example, or I don't know, the CISO, for example. So that ownership from a supporting perspective might still apply. So the ownership is not just in one place, but I think it's just a different type of ownership, one that is more, I mean, for security organization, for example, it's about efficiency and scale, right? You're supporting perhaps multiple hundred, maybe thousands of product owners and making sure that you're pushing data that they need to know and monitoring what they're doing. Their ownership is more reporting how things are, generally speaking. On the other hand, for the digital product owner, they're very focused on their value stream and their product. So what they'll report on is really, as you can imagine, specific to what they do. So that's the way I would interpret it.
Yeah, it's almost like another portfolio because you can use a bunch, you're basically grouping another group of services together, right, to deliver that value stream.
Absolutely. Yes,
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to add, this is Mitch. I just want to add to that because that's been a kind of a debate in higher ed to some extent. Like, do value streams, especially in the context of ITIL 4 that really pushes the value stream, do value streams have their own owners? And I'm hearing what you're saying about, multiple owners within the value stream, but then I hear also conflicting priorities on what gets the focus on which part of the value stream, right? So I think it's hard to, and we could have hundreds of value streams depending on how we define them, so I think we really fall back to our product owner, owning part of that value chain. And then, our service owner, maybe being or now ServiceNow is calling it maybe a solution owner, right? So there's some struggle with like assigning those roles and really making it manageable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very fair comment. And for me, the way I look at it is, I mean, if I look back at when I was a customer, right, and I owned ServiceNow was a service that I provided to my customers internally. I think what made the difference for me is, and it goes a bit in the direction you're talking about, I got the power to make decisions within a certain constraint, and it was very large, right? I could do quite a lot. Obviously, that came with responsibility, so it's not like I could go crazy about that. But basically, what I mean with that is that gave me freedom to really, adapt, or let's say change priorities within my value stream depending on the feedback I was getting from my customers. So there might have been cases where the CHRO might have changed the priorities and said, look, we need to get this done quickly because there's an audit coming and this needs to be done. Then that allows me to shift resources and really maximize where I think I can make the big impact. So to your point with the ownership, I mean, I'm biased. I'm a fan of obviously minimizing ownership and really giving clarity of who's the owner and giving them the power to make those decisions. But I think we also have to understand or empathize with the fact that in large organizations, it might not be an option. It might be too risky, and you might need I don't know how, I mean, in German, we would call it a 4I principle, meaning you need sort of like, it's almost intentional that you have two owners so that if someone drops the ball, there's someone else who might pick it up and at least notice that the ball was dropped. So it's one of those things where I have a personal preference, but I also understand why there is this, let's say, challenge as we speak.
Yeah, it's almost like a big business goal that everybody's driving towards, or something that somebody owns delivery of, right? I could see both working.
Absolutely.
Hearing about the product owner field on the product in ServiceNow, you said hundreds or thousands. Try hundreds of thousands of products.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And every one of them for us has a product owner. Every single one of them. Now, a lot of those might be inconsequential products, because everything that ServiceNow pulls in are just via ServiceNow discovery or integrations with other sources is a potential product. And when you then count the content management team, right, then you have publisher part numbers of a particular product, and it could be 25, 125 different publisher part numbers for one particular product. ServiceNow Express is still a product in this product table in ServiceNow. ServiceNow Snap, ServiceNow utils, right? These are all products. They all have product owners, or potentially have product owners if you're going to manage it that way. So the question then becomes, in your diagram of digital portfolio management, where you see product owner with an emphasis on the backlog, features, releases, defects, and bugs. Okay, so all of those would relate to some product that you want to manage, but are you expecting, you know, these potentially hundreds of thousands of product owners to bubble up into this one to many or many to one via the value stream? If a value stream, if many value streams have different product owners, and then you have 20 or 30 products in one value stream, then at the value stream level, who owns it?
Yeah, we've been having a lot of debate too over digital product versus product. And there's a lot of different definitions for digital product floating around right now, which is causing a lot of confusion. And that, I think that has to be sorted out. We were on the open group talking about that for over an hour on the last few meetings, and just trying to figure out, like, how do we come to terms with the fact that that is, because a digital product, right? Like the laptop's not a digital product, right? It has to have some group of people responsible for some source code or some configuration according to the open group, right? In order for it to be a digital product versus a product.
Well,
So
just looking at that from a ServiceNow perspective, business application has a business owner and an IT application owner. If you choose to leverage those two out of the box roles, fields on the business application form, that business application consumes the app service. The app service is dependent on by the offering. The app service is basically supporting the servers, or the servers are supporting the app service. The servers have software. The software has a product. The product has a product owner. So the business app is one person that potentially have multiple application services it consumes. Those are all supported by infrastructure, and that infrastructure has software, and that software has products. And then you have multiple product owners all supporting that app service rolling up to that business owner. If every single product has a product owner, that works. But if you're not managing the product owner at that level, at that lowest level, then it sort of all unravels.
Right. And that, again, that's product versus digital product too, which I think there's going to be some differences there.
Yeah, I would suppose the digital product would not be as granular.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case.
Okay, thanks.
Definitely an area we got to sort out though, Lou, because that's one of those things, like we talked about minimal viable product on the chat a little while ago. It's one of those ambiguous terms that there's 15 definitions. Every time we say digital product, everybody's thinking something different.
Yeah, but in ServiceNow, there's only one product owner field.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Definitely got to straighten that one out.
So John, if there's no other questions, I'll hand it off. I'll hand it back off to you. I think I'm a bit early, but better early than late. So yeah. Yeah,
that's awesome. Thanks so much for getting us started on this. I think it's an ongoing theme that we're definitely gonna be working on, and I'm going to share a couple of things that are going on around this, and it's going to be a little disjointed, but it'll give you guys some things if you want to look at them for next time. All right, I should be sharing my main screen now. All right, going back to the common service data model, I want to kind of tie some of the things that Ian was talking about here with what some of the things we'll be doing over the next few weeks. So what Ian talked about today, the value streams, even though they're not represented as like directly in the common service data model, they would more than likely be up here in this design domain. And this is a domain we haven't spent a lot of time on, except maybe with the exception of the business applications, right? Which is more of your compliance position up in that design domain. Now we're talking about value streams. There's information objects here, things that architects would typically be involved with maintaining the record for, and enterprise architects versus some of the platform architects or application architects. Now, if we look at that, what we've been kicking around a little bit here is what do we offer in that area of the business architecture, right? Like if you say, hey, I want a reference architecture, that's another thing that means a ton of different things, right? It could be a reference architecture for SAP, and then includes a lot of integration strategies and things like that. So we've been looking at on the EA team is specifically an architect that sits here and works on business strategy. So here's a lot of things like people have been asking for on the forum, business capabilities. These value streams, I think, are a really good idea, because usually that business EA is somebody that's involved in defining that value stream, right? Those value streams that stretch across the business. So we've been looking for, like, how do we provide our customers in industries with a reference architecture in this domain? And we've been tasked with that too, like come up with a capability model that somebody from education can take and drop in the capability table and start using, or somebody from government could drop into the table and start using, because there's not a lot of work being done up there. So how can we get everybody started? We spend a lot of times in these other domains. We talk about strategies or specific domain areas, right? These other architects, but we don't spend a lot of time up in this green area. And it's interesting, Gartner's perspective, or Forrester's perspective on this rather, where they say, if you're an EA, you should spend more than 50% of your time in one of these quadrants. If you try to divide your time up and say 25, 25, 25, 25, you're not a good EA. So it's interesting to hear that presented, where they say you have to focus on one domain and spend 50% of your time in one of these four, or else you won't really have an identity as an enterprise architect. So
Can you relate those to APM, in particular, the enterprise architecture workspace?
Absolutely. This is APM. This is where APM focuses. And then it's going to take a lot of the things when we start talking about TPM and all those, it's going to bring up some of these other domains where we start attaching more of the technology architecture, right, to the business architecture. So
those four quadrants supposed to represent, in the upper left, the application portfolio, in the lower right, the technology portfolio.
Yeah. So the application compliance position, like the business app table, that sits squarely in this area, right? But then when you're saying now we're going to bring up application services, right, then that drops down into these areas to pull data out of that domain. So just like the CSDM, right, where it's at that line across the domains that goes down into the application services, I think that moves out of this quadrant. That's the way I see it anyway.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, in order to represent that quadrant, I've been doing some research, and where it's landed me is with, I don't know if the Business Architecture Guild. So there's this group of people that have been together for about 8 years now, and they focus squarely on this domain. And they have a reference architecture for this domain. And the core things in that domain, in the reference architecture rather, is the capabilities, the organizations, the information objects, and the value streams. So value streams are core, and the value streams are related to capabilities, right? So all these get related in their meta model. So if we look at a particular model, and I work mostly in government, but if we look at a particular model that they represent, it would be, I'll show you one in government real quick. And then, right, so in government, they maintain this huge reference model where there's governments from all over the world that come together and they say, what are the capabilities that we need to deliver as government? And they have all these capabilities in here, and there's 2,000 of them, but they're all at different levels. So they're nested at different levels. Now, the way they flush out in terms of nesting is there's 54, and it's a reference architecture, right? So the expectation with a reference architecture is that you're going to delete some stuff, right? You're not going to use everything in there, but it's supposed to be comprehensive for all governments. So this is a top level. These 54 things are what they come up with over the last 5 years in defining this reference model. These are all the business capabilities that we need for government. And then if you drill down on like case management, right, there's going to be some second level things that you need to do to manage cases. So this will tie back like case matching to a constituent that's in public sector digital services for ServiceNow, or case matching to human resources, that would be HR. So these capability models are specific to industries, and that's what we're trying to get now. So we have a bunch of architects working on different industries, and then how do we provide that to our customers so when they don't have anything, they can come to us and get something started to start working with. So just real quick, and I know we're almost out of time here, I'm going to show an example. Like if we go down, and Lou, I know you guys just purchased the EA workspace, right? So one of the things that we would provide is if you do sign up for the guild, we would be able to give you basically an export so that you can import these capabilities into your EA workspace. And then I can start doing things like, okay, infrastructure management, infrastructure design, how do I go there? And then attach an application to that infrastructure design, or multiple applications, right? So it's to get you started with the business capabilities area. And then the last thing the EA Guild has is they start mapping to value streams as well. So they'll map the capabilities to value streams. So over the next few meetings, people have asked for a little bit more of this. So we'll start talking about some of the actually industry value streams versus the product delivery value stream like Ian talked about today. So these are some of the examples that they have in the guild, right? What do we do to acquire coverage? Or what do we do to determine eligibility? What do we do to, there's all these different things that you would do for value streams inside each of the different industries. So just to let you know, if you are in an industry, reach out to your EAs because there's somebody working on this, and we want to hand you something back so that you can augment what you have, or at least put something in those tables that you can start speaking to and using. All right, and I know we're about out of time here, so
there was a question there. How does this guild artifact differ from APQC? And my answer for that, and I'm kind of new at the BizArt Guild in particular, but the BizArt Guild focuses more on value streams and capabilities. APQC to me focuses more on processes, so they're complementary in my mind. I know, John, you're more experienced with both than I am.
I would exactly answered it the exact same way. So yeah, I would say definitely here. There's the other, if you join this, it's $125 a year to join, and I joined it. And if you join it and just sitting in on those meetings with all of the other business architects. So on the government one, we talked about one of those 2,000 capabilities for 45 minutes. So the detail they go into here, and I think that's what I like about that. And APQC, I think somebody defines those and then gives them to you. This is a guild, so it's a consortium of people in these actual roles that are defining this business architecture that decides what goes into those standards. So I think I learned a ton since I've been on here, just on how the process of defining a business capability, which represents the business at rest, and then how they tie back to value streams. So I think these guys, I think this is the kind of de facto standard for business architecture to me, and not, the process of defining things and all the things we always talk about, but the actual objects, right? The actual data that gets created for an industry.
And if you would, this is the answer to my question that I posed to Ian early on. APQC provides the questions. Our data post-service initiation or operations gives us the data and context, which is the answers to those questions. And so if you take the business architecture guild and the value stream story, you plug it into the role with the questions and answers, the answer to the value stream lies at the end of the APQC question and answer. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, I love that. All right. That brings us to the end here, and we will, I think next week we'll pick up on business capabilities. That's what I had on the list. I don't have time to go through our kind of content agenda, but I'll put that out there so everybody has it on the community. So Ian, thanks again so much for sharing your content today. And I will put that deck in the community so everybody can have a look at it. And we'll talk to everybody in a few weeks.
Have a good